So thanks for coming out. I want to thank some of our sponsors, well, most of our sponsors for the exhibition programming. Tonight we have the South Carolina Arts Commission, the City of Spartanburg, the Spartanburg County Foundation, Chapman Cultural Center, Walker and Davis Barnes, Misty and Kevin Hudson, Vicki and Tom Netter-Rostek, Michelle and Halsey Cook, Amy and Erwin Holbein, and Susu and George Dean Johnson as some of our most loyal supporters. Before I introduce Adrian, I just have to do a couple of little wee plugs, as they say in Ireland, for Sam stuff. So if you do not know, we have a great art school, community, non-accredited based school across the plaza, ceramics, 2D, winter session brochures are just out. We're finally moving to some more tech-based art school offerings because we need to meet our public where they are. And where are you all? You're in front of a screen, so we teach you how to use it. And then also, Adrian we have a lovely partnership with our public library, a lecture series called Art in Our Time. And Adrian will be back December 15th. Starts at noon, it's free, so come to the library and learn about the symbolism and processes and all of the wonderful things. And then also December 1st, we will have an artisan pop-up shop here in the Art Museum from 5 to 8. And then you guys, COVID is kind of hopefully almost over. We are bringing back our signature gala called Oddball. This is at the end of January. It's a very high energy, interactive, participatory event, so look for it on our website, social media, and all of that. Okay, without further ado, Adrian Rhodes. Okay, so Adrian resides in Hartsville, South Carolina. She has many, many accolades. I'm just going to run through a couple. Recipient of the South Carolina Arts Commission 2020 Individual Artist Fellowship and the 2019 CCAC Artist Fellowship. She also was a winner of the 2020 701 CCA Prize from the Center for Contemporary Art in Columbia, which ironically enough is like 2 blocks from my son's apartment. Noodle, when I come down for lunch, we could go here. Yeah, no, Mom. Anyway, so we first met Adrian in a group show called Paper Worlds. That was a while ago, but just completely enamored. You had the alcove space. Yep. And Ashley Schuler, who was our associate curator, is counting you all as you come in. She's the one who said, Elizabeth, we should really give Adrian a solo show. And I was like, bloody brilliant, we should give Adrian a show. And she agreed. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Adrian Rhodes.
How could you say no to a solo show in a space like this? This is an incredible gallery to show in, and I really feel like my work kind of hovers between site-specific installation and a more traditional understanding of framed works on a wall in a gallery. So this is such a nice place. The way the walls work, the height, the scope, the colors of the gallery, the black and the white and the gray actually all tie in really well, and so it was a wonderful experience, and I thank you so much for having me in this space to play. One thing I did specifically for this space that I really love is just that little red line along the sides of the edges. I like the way it ties back to the sculptures. So I am a multidisciplinary artist. I think a lot of artists consider themselves that these days. I finally admit that I do sculptures. So that's something, a label that I've fought for a long time, that I'm, finally showing sculptures on pedestals and admitting that that's a thing that I do. So sculptures, paintings, prints, fine art prints. So I have both woodcut, I have lithograph, I have an etching in here, a lot of litho actually. There's actually a lot of litho in here. So sculptures, textiles, embroidery. So it really runs the breadth, and I sometimes don't really know how to describe myself. Like, what do you do? It's like, well, I do a little bit of everything. But really the thing that ties it all together, I think, is the drawing practice. So when I'm working in sculpture, when I'm working in painting, when I'm working in print, it's all rooted back into drawing. One thing you're going to notice, I think this is going to be a show that rewards time. The longer you are in this gallery, the more overlap you're going to see. The longer you're in here, the more Easter eggs you're going to find. You're going to see that this painting and this print share compositional elements. You're going to see that this sculpture is printed from the same relief block that this other aspect is. So the longer you're in here, the more it's going to reward repeat viewing. So if this is the only time you come to the show, you're only going to be scratching the surface at it. Hopefully it's something you can come back to and visit. The show's up until February. So the longer you're here, the more times you visit, the more you're going to see. I will ask you all to pay close attention to the fine print. Because often I have found that people have one experience of my work that once they read the fine print within the work or they read the title, it completely turns it on its head, and you get like maybe a little sinking feeling in your stomach that this isn't as pretty and pleasant as it seems at first. So my work deals with grief. My work deals with mortality and loss and motherhood. I lost my mother before I had my two daughters, two very vibrant, very energetic girls who are not here tonight. And so my mother and my daughters never met, but I can see those connections. And I've been thinking a lot about generational memory. I've been thinking a lot about these cycles, and I've been thinking about these connections and these ties that bind. A lot of times when people talk about work that deals with motherhood, if I say that to you, not to you, right, but if I say that to people, they think it's going to be something very pastel and very Mary Cassatt, who was actually pretty edgy for her time too. But it's going to be very pastel, it's going to be very sweet, and it's going to be very pretty. But my experience of motherhood, both as a daughter and as a mother, is one that is very intense, right? You literally share a body for a year, right? Because those 3 months after are just as intense as those 9 that come before it. So you share a body, and then birth itself is a traumatic bodily act. You come into this world in blood. So it is not something that is pretty and saccharine. And it is something that I think you cannot be that close without hurting each other. There is going to be wounding, no matter how positive your relationship is, no matter how much you love each other, there's going to be wounding. So a lot of my work deals with that struggle for identity as an individual apart from your generational, apart from your natural line. There's a tension between wanting to cut yourself free from where you came from and wanting to cling to it. So you want to get away from it, you want to establish who you are, or at least I did, establish who you are as a person, establish who you are as an individual, see how you can stand on your own feet without these people who have mothered you and picked at you and preened you and told you to tuck in your shirt and told you to stand up straight. But at the same time, the thought of losing that is so devastating, it's just putting to it tighter. So there's that tension between wanting to be free. I'm seeing so many women in here going, yeah, exactly. So you want to be free, you want to be your own self, but you also want to preserve that where you came from. So I'm looking at these generational memories, looking at these generational cycles. That's going to be a really important part. There's a lot of ropes in my show. There's a lot of tables, there's a lot of knot work. A lot of my work deals with anxiety, it deals with fear, and it deals with stress and worry. So I think these ropes, they're entangling, but they're also tethering. So they're the ties that bind, but they're also umbilical. They hold you together, but you have to cut them to be free. So there's that tension between all those different aspects of that in the ropes. There is an iconographic guide to the work. I invite you to read that in detail. There's also more information about it on my website. If you go through the iconography, you're going to have a much deeper understanding of all of the work in the show. Just a quick rundown of some of the important things. There's a lot of pomegranates. Pomegranates go back to the myth of Persephone, and so they bring in the idea of the mother-daughter relationship, and also they incorporate ideas of death and remembrance. So there's a mortality that comes into play. It's hard to find myths about gods that deal with mortality, isn't it? Gods that die. Persephone is a good myth for that. Bees are fascinating to me for a whole lot of different reasons. First of all, they're a matrilineal society. So if you look at the structure of a beehive, the queen is the mother, the workers are all the sisters, the drones are just there for what you need to get out of them, and they get kicked out of them. But it is a matrilineal society, so that those ties between those mothers and those daughters. Furthermore, though, in Celtic mythology, and I'm an equal opportunity thief of different mythologies, so I don't have to come from that culture in order to absorb that mythology. I love mythologies because they're the way that people tried to make sense out of the world when they couldn't understand it, and created stories to explain it. So in Celtic mythology, a single bee is symbolic of a soul leaving the body. And so a lot of times, you know, some of my earlier work was these swarms and hives of bees. I hope they give you a little bit of an itchy feeling. You know, if I made the walls swarming with cockroaches, people wouldn't come in the gallery. But if I make them the walls will be literally crawling with insects and have gashing wounds. People will go, it's so beautiful. You know, which I love that I'm able to pull that off somehow. So the single bee is emblematic of the soul leaving the body. There's also a beautiful tradition where if you keep bees and something monumentous happens in your family, you have to go tell the bees. If you don't go tell the bees, you will offend them and they will abscond, and so then you will lose your hives. In fact, when Elizabeth died, the beekeeper at Windsor Palace went to the hives and very solemnly announced to the beehives that the queen was dead, Charles was the king, and then draped them in black crepe so that the bees could mourn along with everybody else. So that's just, I think, such a beautiful tradition. And I had a show a couple of years ago called Go Tell Bees, because that is such an important ritual. I love that ritual. Some other symbols you're going to see are paper airplanes. For me, a paper airplane is very hopeful. You know, you're launching this whimsical little thing off, hoping that it goes, hoping that it makes its mark, hoping that it travels its distance and it gets to where it's going. So for me, all those paper airplanes, they're longing, they're searching, they're trying to get yourself to where you see yourself down the road. Some other things you're going to see in here, the observatory repeats itself a lot. So if you think about it, and this, I do use one specific image of an observatory. It's the Sphinx Observatory in Switzerland. It's way up on top of the Alps. I've never been there. Would love to. If you go to Wikipedia, it is the first picture of an observatory you're going to see. And when I saw it, I said, that's it. That's the one I need. It's gorgeous. Perched on top of the mountain. But an observatory is a place where a scientist goes, stares into the universe, and asks the kinds of questions that bring more questions, not the kinds of questions that bring you answers. And that is exactly what the artist does in the studio. You go into seclusion and you ask the kinds of questions that beget more questions. You don't ask the kinds of questions that beget answers. So anytime that you see an observatory, it is a self-portrait. It is the idea of the artist in the studio pursuing these kinds of questions. You're going to see a lot of X's too, just kind of like a denial. You know, exit out, mark it out. It's also a tally. Speaking of tallies, there is a ton of repetition in this show. So I really am the kind of person, why do it once when you can do it 999 times? Right? So you're going to see a lot of repetition. I'm dealing with intrusive thoughts, I'm dealing with repetitive thoughts, I'm dealing with the inability to move past events, to move on from losses, and to reincorporate those into your life. I can go into more depth about specific pieces. I invite all of you to come talk to me about any of them as you move around and look. I will also say, no, I'm not done yet, sorry, Elizabeth. I will say, everything I do is analog. It takes a lot of time. Everything is done by hand. I'm not saying that I'll never use a laser cutter, but for the most part, my work is analog. And I think that brings something to the experience of looking at it. Because we live in a society where things, you can't stop at an intersection without the billboard changing 3 times before the light does, right? So we are a very instant society, instant gratification, and we don't like heavy thoughts. So if I do work about heavy thoughts that takes a long time, I think that says something in the experience of the work at the back end. If I spend 300 hours on an embroidery, it means I had to sit there for 300 hours thinking about these things. And hopefully that's something that you pick up on the other end. The show is titled After the Ravens. The only bird in the exhibition is either a magpie or scissors. So there are no ravens in the show. But the reason that I called it After the Ravens is because ravens are historically associated with omens. Okay? Ravens are associated with bad news. And so so I lost both of my parents 10 years ago, 11 years ago, 12 years ago. I lost my mother in 2007, however long ago that was now. And then my dad, this is my husband with the camera, so I'm checking with my time with him. What, 5 years ago? I lost my dad. So what happens long after you've got horse news, right? When the ravens have come and they've left, when they've brought the ill omens, and when the worst case scenario has played itself out, and you're on the other side of it, you know? What do you find over there on the other side? So what is there after the ravens come? What is there after those omens? So that's where the title comes from. I do invite you to look closely at all of the work and all of the titles because, you know, they may, it's kind of bleak the longer you look at it. When I did my MFA, I did an entire semester. Does anybody know Doug McAbee? Yeah, okay, so he taught a seminar. I went to Winthrop for my MFA, and he taught graduate seminar. And we did an entire semester on the idea of beauty in art. And one of my professors actually said, Adrian, you have a little bit of a beauty problem with your work, so you need to think about how you're using it. And so I did, and I thought about it, and I realized that if I just put these topics out in the gallery, people are going to shut down and they're going to walk away. But if I make it beautiful first, if I make it inviting, if I light a candle, then they're going to come to it. And then they're going to engage with it. So as you come in, you're going to see rhinestones, you're going to come see iridescents, you're going to see beads, you're going to see sparkles, you're going to see glitters. You're going to see colors that shift, you're going to see an incredible amount of detail. And the longer you're in here, I think the more that dark undertone is going to start to rise up. I hope, at least, it's going to start to rise up around you. I have a drawing in a series on the back wall right there, and you know, so I showed it to somebody. I posted it on Instagram, and from a few feet away, the drawing reads, "Everything will be all right." And it's right in the middle. So it says, "Everything will be all right." And I had one of my friends message me saying, "I really needed to see that today. Thank you so much." And I messaged her back and I said, "Babe, did you read the fine print?" And she said, "Adrian, why are you like this?" And so when you read the fine print in the drawing, it says believed by someone only once. So, you know, once you get the fine print, you're going to get to that place on the other side. Yeah, so there's my show, and I'll talk to you more about it.
So the acoustics are terrible, terrible in this room. So I invite you. There are so many things to ask this incredibly talented artist about, and we're not going to. And stork.
Oh, I didn't talk about the stork scissors.
Let's save it. Let's make people come up and ask you about the stork scissors.
They're really important.
They're very, very, very important, and this is one of the great things about contemporary art, ladies and gentlemen, is yes, you can be lulled into playfulness and whimsy, but yet there's such a deeper, more complex interpretation to be had, and we all have an association with the paper airplane.
My father-in-law, sorry, but my father-in-law the other day is like, why 999? Because there's 999 airplanes in the pile. It says it on the label. Why 999, Adrian? Why not 1,000? And I said, you got it. You got there. You understand art, Alan.
Yay, father-in-law.
Yay, father-in-law.
Woo! Big round of applause for father-in-law. So anyway, you guys, thank you so much for coming. Please help us not have to pack up food or drink. Help yourselves. Have a great time. Adrian, Rhodes, it's delightful to have you.
Talk to me. I'll be here as long as I have people to talk to.